Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome you all to a presentation and panel discussion regarding Nebraska's Women in STEM, Listen Then Act, a recently launched report that celebrates women in STEM, highlights the barriers they face, and provides recommendations on recruiting and retaining women in STEM careers here in Nebraska. Thank you all so much for being here. We are so excited with the amount of you that registered and are excited to learn more about the report. My name is Sasha Forson, and I'm the Assistant Director of Bio Nebraska. We are incredibly excited to share this report with you today, as well as hear from our amazing panelists who we will be introducing to you soon. The Nebraska Women in STEM report was conducted by the Center for Public Affairs Research at the University of Nebraska at Omaha and was launched across the state in June by Bio Nebraska and Nebraska Cures. We are incredibly grateful for the response that we've received so far and for the continued opportunity to share the report's findings like this event today. We'd like to also thank the organizations that made this report possible through their generous financial support, and they are Nebraska Business Development Center, Union Pacific Community Ties Giving Program, STREC, McCarthy Building Companies, and NASA Nebraska Space Grant. I also want to give a shout out to our Bio Nebraska Women in STEM sponsors for their contributions to advance Nebraska Women in STEM. They are Neogen, Nebraska Business Development Center, STREC, Becton Dickinson, Bayer, McCarthy Building Companies, and Novozymes. Last but not least, thank you to the Nebraska Women in STEM Advisory Committee for their continued guidance and support moving this initiative forward. We truly would not be able to do this without these folks. They are Razia Aziz Seibel, Kathy Lang, Julie Sigmund, Amanda Wilson, Agnes Lena, Dr. Kim Carlson, Dr. Kelly Gomez-Johnson, Dr. Angela Pannier. And familiar faces, you'll see some of those folks again on our panel. And now I'll hand things off to my Nebraska Women in STEM partner, Amanda McGill-Johnson, the Executive Director of Nebraska Cures.
Thank you, Sasha. It is my job to quickly go over the report findings. I know some people who are watching this webinar may have seen one of our previous presentations, so I'll try to be brief, but I think it's important to share this information for those of you who it is new to, and then we'll launch into the panel. So for our report, 48 women in STEM from around Nebraska were interviewed, and CPAR pulled out these particular key findings from those interviews. First, the first key theme that really emerged from it was early interest in life to pursue a career in STEM. So that's where women talked about how they had parents or teachers that really encouraged them to choose STEM careers. And in many cases, they had a STEM parent or like a father in STEM that really they were able to go to for questions and support. And of course, those teachers really cheering them on early in the pipeline. The second key finding was how women have persevered in STEM through grit and confidence. So the interviewers directly asked participants why they were able to succeed in STEM careers, even though few women are in those fields. And that's where those experiences of grit, confidence, self-assuredness really came into play. They also spoke to the role of mentors and how important they were for their ability to really thrive in STEM careers. The third theme was workplace inequities and gender-related power dynamics. So it won't be surprising that this is where maybe gender stereotypes and stories around that, those stereotypes used by supervisors had impacted women. And that was supervisors who are both male and female. They talked about how there are women supervisors who maybe are more susceptible to those gender stereotypes. And then there's others who were very, very supportive of the women they're supervising. We also saw several stories of overt discrimination and harassment, which we unfortunately know is the case. And we also, pulled out some quotations from women of color about how race and gender, impact their role there. And I'm even going to read a quick quotation from one of our interviewees to demonstrate this. She said, "I can't hide my accent. I can't hide my color. My culture is super loud. But the way I overcame that, I decided to adopt a professional outlook. I never had side conversations with my bosses. I kept it so professional. My language barriers, my cultural barriers, like I can't do jokes. I made sure that everything I did was in writing. So just one example of the sort of experiences that women were sharing. The fourth key finding is barriers in career promotion and advancement. This really came down to women not understanding how they can negotiate or being equipped to apply for that promotion. And like I said, negotiating salaries and positions. So it's definitely something we all need to work on. The fifth theme, challenges navigating work-life balance. Women are often the primary caretaker, even in families where with very supportive spouses, a lot still falls upon women. Struggles with maternity leave and understanding it. You know, if you're in a field that's primarily men, maybe HR needs a tune-up on how they talk about maternity leave with women and really helping them understand what their rights are there. And six, unique Nebraska influences on the STEM culture and workforce. So this was interesting because, you know, we think about Nebraska and we think about how maybe there are more gender stereotypes, and there were stories within the report about seeing other families where the girls are pushed into more traditionally female careers or toys, whereas the boys are pushed into more of the STEM fields. But many women also talked about how it was their Nebraska roots and values growing up on a farm and seeing their mothers work just as hard as their dads, that really taught them that grit and confidence and that self-worth that has been very instrumental in their ability to maintain and persevere in STEM careers. So there are different influences here in Nebraska. The women in the study were also asked about how they think improvements can be made, and 6 recommendations emerged. The first is to have greater awareness of the barriers for women in STEM. Many women, both in and out of STEM, look at this report and find relatable experiences. I know I saw relatable experiences. Now is the time to educate the rest of the community about these barriers so we can begin to work to remove them. Our economy and job field depends on it. Professional development opportunities. Employers need more education about how to best remove barriers for women and create inviting and supportive environments for them to flourish. Women also need more training to help them round out their skill sets and learn to productively advocate for themselves and for policies. 3, increasing access to professional networks. Women benefit from connection and mentorship. There are some active STEM organizations focused on women, but more needs to be done to connect women statewide and across STEM sectors. Greater flexibility in the workplace. Women, especially with young families, want to find ways to work productively while not sacrificing family. This includes more accessible, affordable, and quality childcare, flexible or remote work hours, and paid maternity leave. 5th, supporting teachers in schools to build the STEM pipeline. Teachers often have a tremendous impact on what a student considers for a career. More focus on opportunities for girls and teens to see women in STEM careers helps them see those jobs as options for themselves. This is especially critical in rural areas. Advancing science literacy. A more science and tech literate society would benefit the growth of the entire STEM workforce, including women. Science communication training for women would not only help increase science literacy, but also build confidence in their own work. Advancing science literacy across Nebraska provides a holistic approach to elevating the importance of women in STEM and the value of Nebraska's STEM workforce across the state. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because we will move to our wonderful panel discussion. I'm going to introduce them all here in alphabetical order. Dr. Kelly Gomez-Johnson, Assistant Professor of STEM Education at UNO. Dr. Sharon Obasi, Director and Associate Professor of Family Science at UNK. Dr. Angela Pannier, Swartz Family Chair, Biological Systems Engineering at UNL, and Amanda Wilson, Senior Product Quality Manager at Novozymes. So thank you all for taking the time to join us here today. We appreciate it. The first question, and Kelly, I'm going to start with you, is what about the study really resonates with you? And is there a particular idea or quote that really stood out?
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm just honored to be a part of this mission, and it's been a big mission for us at UNO for sure. But I am excited to see this statewide network created. So thank you to everyone involved. So for me, everything resonated with me. And one of the biggest things was that there weren't really any big surprises. It was a lot of things that in our networks and circles we know are true. But one quote that I think I'm going crazy. I think I'm going crazy. And I just thought back to the interactions I have with students, undergraduates, graduates, interactions I have with colleagues, interactions that, or experiences I've had, where how many times I've just felt isolated and lost a bit, like I'm going crazy, in terms of not knowing how to navigate spaces, not knowing how to navigate an interaction, not knowing what the ceiling is on my workload, and balancing life. So I know it's in here in a lot of different places, but I think I'm going crazy definitely was something I read and I was like, ping, yep, that's me.
Very relatable. Sharon, what would you like to share?
Sure, thank you so much. Love to see all of you here. I think for me, to echo what Kelly shared, no surprises necessarily. That was sort of comforting on to a certain level. Disappointing, but yet. I think for me, working in family science, definitely the importance of family in fostering, generating, cultivating interest in STEM throughout the lifespan. In terms of a quote that I think really hit me personally was the idea of speaking up. I recognize the need, you have to speak up. And I come from a culture sometimes where that, you wait till you're invited to take part. And sometimes in this environment, you have to recognize that you have the agency to sometimes speak up and navigate your own path. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Angie.
Well, I don't want to be too repetitive, but I think Sharon and Kelly have said everything I was thinking in terms of not shocking, not super happy, but I suppose it's also a sense of relief when some of these things that you maybe have only thought in your head, you see on paper or you see in quotes from individuals from diverse areas of industry and academia, although under the STEM umbrella, that we all think and feel or the same way. And so it sort of gives you a little bit of a sense of, okay, I'm not alone and I'm not crazy. As Kelly said, I'm not crazy about feeling these things and thinking these things. I'd say the quote that resonated with me, which I've said it, it's not my quote, but I've said it, is that there's always guilt. It's a constant sense of guilt. And I have felt that many times, and it can be contrasted between being guilty about children and work, but for those that don't have children, there's other guilt, there's other pressures that I think women are driven by guilt. And so that was the quote that resonated with me. But I just am happy to be here today and happy that we put this much energy, effort, and funds into a report, because reports are very important to get change to occur, and not just women in a room saying, yeah, that happened to me. This is a well executed report and study, and I really appreciate it.
And I appreciate that. And trust me, we're not done. We're not stopping with the report, and we'll get more to that maybe at the end of the presentation and what comes next. Amanda, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, this is a hard question to go last on, because I think I'm going to just repeat what the other panelists said. So I think like everyone else has said, I mean, every woman I've shared this study with and discussed the results has said no surprises here. So I think kind of like Angie was saying, like, it's so great to have this report to kind of back up, and now it's like more than just our verbal experiences. It validates us as women in STEM, but also is kind of like a piece of evidence that we can like put our finger to. But I think like when I think about what stuck with me, and I think it really made me reflect on who needs to see and hear the report. So if all of the women in STEM already know this and there's no surprises, I think there was a quote in there, something about like getting our male allies into the room and to hear this has really stuck with me, because it's like, if we already all know this and this is no surprises, then how do we make sure that if there are people who are surprised by this, getting the study into their hands and like making the impact on them. So that's kind of what that part stuck with me the most.
Great. I will throw it out there to those who are viewing this live. If you have any specific questions you would like to ask the panelists, go ahead and throw those into the Q&A. I'll move on to our next pre-planned question though. How do you think the pandemic has changed experiences for women in STEM, either for the better or for worse? Sharon, I'll start with you for this one.
Wow, I was afraid of this. Okay, so
It's
from my
okay, no pressure.
no pressure. From my perspective, oh my goodness, there's so many things you can point to, but I definitely think that one thing we're always aware of, to a certain extent, work-life balance pre-pandemic. So the pandemic really made us kind of step back and really think about what that means, because for some of us, work came home, and for others, work became a place of reduced safety and things like that. So I think from my perspective, the pandemic has allowed us the luxury, those who have it anyway, the luxury to sort of like really rethink how you want to navigate your space with work and with your home life and so on, your other interests, and also the chance to maybe dream and articulate other ways of engaging in STEM fields, STEM careers outside of what may be deemed the traditional approaches. So yeah, opportunity to reflect and to reconfigure to a certain extent. Yes, thank you.
Great. Angie, how do you think it's changed things?
I think if we think about in terms of mothers, which I don't want to exclude individuals that are not mothers, but I am a mother and I see it through that lens. I think my perspective is if you're the mother of small children, I don't know how you survived the past 2.5 years. I think that it showed that it is an unsustainable way that we try to live and do it all, right? I was fortunate to not have small children, but to have medium children. And that for me, it showed what was important and that I was missing out on some of the things that were important. And the pandemic took away all of the unimportant things, right? Or showed you how you could prioritize at work. And so I think that there was privilege that came from some of the pandemic things, but it depends on your work-life balance, the age of your children, your partner. And so for me, what I learned is that a lot of the stuff that we were doing in campus was not that important. And, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, you had to focus in your classes only on what was important, in your research group only on what was important. And then you had this extra time with your family. And so for me, this may be a very privileged answer, but it was like, hey, there's a lot of stuff that we do that's not very important.
Fascinating. Really help prioritize. Yes. Amanda.
Yeah, I think initially during the pandemic, it was definitely worse for women in STEM, and taking a bit of a different approach than the other panelists have talked about. And the report talks about women really need a strong network when they're within women in STEM. And I think the pandemic was, very much isolating. It cut a lot of networking events off. We had to do things virtually. And I know initially it worked, but I felt a lot of women expressed, I can't do more virtual things. So they just kind of got cut off from their network entirely. So I think initially it was worse. And then if you add on the things like Angie mentioned, Fleur, like women who are mothers, like you have to take on an extra workload. But I definitely think from like a network, women were really cut off. But now when I think about the impact the pandemic has had, I do think there's some aspects that are better because many companies are adapting to more flexible work policies because that's what people are asking for. And they saw like during the pandemic, you can make some more things work. So I think probably in the long term, there's some aspects that have changed for the better, especially if you look at like flexible work policies, which a lot of women in STEM ask for.
Great, thank you. Kelly.
Yeah, in my mind, when I thought about this question, I thought that everything changed and nothing changed. I feel like everything around me changed, but it was really hard for me internally to change what I expected of myself, what I expected of my achievement, and what was going to get, put on the tenure package, and how I needed to still keep teams together and still make progress on projects, and it was interesting as the dynamic because it wasn't an external pressure. It was all internal. And I realized kind of how much, just how much I had relied on myself to keep myself going. And then also all of my support. And then realizing when it left, it kind of put me in a dangerous place where now I just had to push harder alone. And And so it took a very ugly breakdown to renegotiate. I mean, it's really like looking at renegotiating with myself, renegotiating with my partner, renegotiating with people I work with, having to, call and say everything off my calendar this week, everything, and it all can just stop. And I didn't know that was possible until a pandemic, that you could just cancel everything on your calendar in a week and that the world would not fall apart. Since then, I have not done a better job of understanding how that works. But I think this idea of everything changed and nothing changed. And so now it's, how do you re-enter? How do you find out what is important and not just stacking everything back on your schedule and really prioritizing? I'm still challenged with that. I see a lot of people around me, women in particular, who are struggling with how to reprioritize. Even if we know better, it's sometimes hard to do better. And so I'm still seeing that as a challenge.
Thank you for sharing that. And I should let the panelists know, if you want to chime back in again, just let me know, give me a signal if somebody sparks something that draws something into your mind. Our next question is there a unique challenge for your sector of STEM? And Amanda, I'm going to start with you, since you're kind of the non-academia person on our panel here today.
Yeah, and that's so for I'm a chemical engineer by degree, but I've also worked in manufacturing for my entire career since I graduated. So I kind of have the duality of manufacturing is very, very male dominated, in addition to engineering has historically been male dominated. So manufacturing, operations, maintenance, and all companies I've worked for, there's maybe been 1 or 2 women on staff in the blue collar roles. So I was definitely in the minority. So I had to learn fairly early on of building my network. Couldn't always be from within my current workforce or within my current kind of comfort zone of people I could see every day. I had to really look externally and try to find resources like Bio Nebraska, other biotech companies in the state that have also women who are in the minority. So it really kind of pushes you to get creative about your network and your resources when maybe, the people that are surrounding you in manufacturing are not women.
Yeah. Angie, I'll go to you next.
I looked at this question and based on the report, I don't know if I have unique challenges in STEM and academia. Unfortunately, I think there's many similar challenges. I think that lacking role models, lacking mentors, lacking networks, lacking allies, lacking support systems for work-life balance, combined with sort of similar to what Kelly was saying, the last question is that I say this and I know it sounds negative, but women can't be mediocre. We don't even have the luxury of being mediocre, right? Because we have to be the best. And I'm not saying that all women do, but when there's so few of us and the spotlight is on us, you have to be the best. And you have this guilt, going back to my previous answer, that you should be the best because you're representing more than yourself, or all these things. And so I really didn't see anything unique. I just saw that that this is why an organization like joining women in STEM across the entire state is so powerful, because there's a lot of intersections where we do have very similar challenges, that if we could help each other out, we should be able to help the entire state out.
Great. Kelly, do you have any thoughts on your space?
Oh, a few. Yeah. In STEM education, it's not just a complicated problem, it's a complex problem. Having a clear plan is just not going to work when you're thinking about, how do we work with teachers who are teaching our littlest ones to have a positive STEM mindset if maybe they've been traumatized by STEM as a learner, and then they're infusing that learning into their children, their students. And then, how do we motivate someone who's in high school or middle school to be interested in a STEM field if they don't have high quality instruction that ignites their love of learning and investigating? What do we do with a student who enters college already in a segregated occupational space or in a class where they're, not represented, and then they're not given instruction that's inclusive, So I feel like in STEM education, it's really looking at a very huge complex issue that we have to just attack and take action on from every angle at all times. So I feel like that's probably the biggest challenge in the sector of STEM education, is realizing that from birth until through your entire lifespan, we have this opportunity to make an impact, to make STEM more inclusive for any underrepresented group. And that just makes finding your targets harder.
Yes. Sharon, do you have any thoughts?
I will just simply echo my colleagues. I think, as Angie said, women have to be remarkable. I would say, from my particular lens, women who look like me need to be particularly remarkable in these spaces. I also think I kind of took Kelly's approach as well, because I'm thinking as I'm educating, as I'm teaching students in higher ed who may want to go on into STEM or STEM related fields, how do I encourage, how do I support, how do I keep them motivated and interested and keep them on that path, as it were. But I also think that there's space in terms of recognizing that, yes, we need networks and we need mentors and so on, but we also need allies. We need people to we not only need to see ourselves in these spaces, we need others to see us in these spaces. And I think that's been an interesting chance for growth as we have this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that response.
I did want to build on something Angie had said, because I thought about it after she talked. So like within manufacturing, I mentioned there's not many women, but I can think of there's a handful of women that that were in leadership positions that I encountered very early in my career, and they made a positive impact on me. And I've tried to be that woman for other younger women in STEM. I've taken a few different leadership roles in my career, and I've tried to be that same kind of role model. And that is a lot of pressure, you know, like being on the other side of it, not realizing. And a lot of it is stuff I'm putting on myself, but just there are exceptional women you can find in your industry, even if you're in the minority. And then those women kind of feel a lot of pressure because they realize they have to be exceptional because there's not many of us. So I just want to build on that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. We are starting to get a couple of questions from viewers. So Angie, you'll be the first one. So listen particularly closely. You are all successful STEM professionals who happen to be women. How do you see where you are at your professional trajectory in the STEM field in Nebraska? What are the greatest resources you've benefited from, and where are the biggest gaps in available support to date? They acknowledge, Angie, you've touched on this a little bit, but do you want to dive into that any further?
That's a big question. That's another hour.
I know, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions packed in there. So thank you. It's a wonderful, you know, but I guess I'm going to summarize it as what worked for you and what were you missing? And what worked for me, one thing I'm going to say, which is, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I have a very supportive partner who takes on 70% of the household duties. And I know I'm very lucky to have him. And so I think that's partly why I was able to be successful, because we run the household in a 50-50 or 40-60, or gosh, next week's going to be 90 him. And we can flex on that. And I think that's been a big resource. So I don't know how to help. I can't provide that to everyone. I do tell young girls to really think very closely about your partner and make sure that you have goals that align. I think early on, I had some really good mentors that helped me catch some things and be strategic about some decisions. And I'm really appreciative to those mentors. I do have to say, though, that some of those mentors from early on in my career, once I got to be a very successful woman in STEM, are no longer friends or mentors of mine anymore. I am now a threat to them. And so I find myself at a new place where I need mentors again, and they're harder to come by. And so I do think that the last thing I'll say, and it was echoed in the report, is that Nebraskans do have a history of having females lead things. There are traditional roles for that, but if we can sort of erase those roles, we do have role models in other ways. And so I do think that maybe the state is a great place to receive and promote women in leadership roles and other roles as well. But I honestly think that I got to where I am because I'm just very stubborn and I have a lot of grit. And I have very thick skin and people say lots of things and it doesn't bother me.
Would anyone else like to take a stab at this question?
Yeah, I will.
Amanda?
Yeah, I do. I definitely will echo what Angie said about maybe not even just your partner, but a good support system. So I think my partner is very, very supportive and has been of my career. And then also finding advocates for yourself, even within your workplace or without your workplace. I mean, in the spaces that you operate in. So there are some people that throughout my career they may have been male colleagues actually who have advocated for me and helped me, you know, and helped coach me to be who I am today. So I think having a strong support network and advocates, and then some of the gaps I think is like, how do you start to do that? Like, I think that's kind of where like women don't necessarily know where to start finding advocates. And I'm not sure like how you kind of, I feel like I got lucky in that I found some people who were willing to go to bat for me. If I hadn't found them, I don't know where I'd be today. So like, I don't know how to advise people to go find those advocates.
And you know, a male would never say, I got lucky, I found those people. I mean, and so that's just shot because like, so you're feeling like, wow, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to mentor me. And that's such a female attitude to have, like, oh, I don't want to bother you. Probably because we don't want to be bothered by some things, but I just find that fascinating. And I think that speaks to, at Nebraska, at UNL, I really am an advocate for formal mentoring structures. And I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it perfectly. But if you rely on happenstance mentoring, then, you know, if the male colleagues go for a beer, that we used to have male colleagues in my department go for beers after work. Well, I had to go pick up kids from daycare. No, I wanted to pick up my kids from daycare. And so I missed out on those beers where that started to happen. So sorry, I interrupted there, but your attitude is so reminiscent of all of us. Like,
well, and this does like flow into the next question real quick, Kelly, because I'll just get it in there because I think it's relevant to this too. And that's what approaches you've used or you think are most beneficial to identify allies, mentors, advocates for your professional development and balancing life and sanity and all that. So Kelly, do you have a few things you want to share?
Yeah, it goes along with that and then also builds upon the conversation that was happening. And, you know, there's so much hidden labor. There's so much. And so I know for me, I'm feeling guilt because I want to support the people around me, but I feel like they're trying to find me running down the hall or they're trying to find, you know, and I don't know about you all. I'm guessing everybody watching or listening, they don't know many women in STEM, many underrepresented individuals who are twiddling their thumbs looking for work. Like everybody's so busy. And so then you're adding all of these passion projects and initiatives and mentoring others and trying to build up those around you. And you realize there's so much hidden labor in there that goes unrecognized. So one thing that we've been trying at UNO in our Women in STEM organization, we've partnered with NASA Nebraska, we've partnered with our Center for Faculty Excellence, is trying to recognize some of that hidden labor, like finding out ways to recognize people for the work they're doing. For us, we were looking at peer collaboration. Like, how are you working with other people on campus, students, faculty, staff? What are those hidden work that you're doing that other people are not recognizing and valuing? And then we want to recognize and value it and put a dollar amount to it because it's worth your time and your talent. And now we're still working on formalizing that and making sure that it's a systematic or more structured, not just a grassroots initiative, but I feel like trying to put some structures and systems around these things so that they aren't just nice things that people do for each other, because that's just a lot of labor going in areas where people are underrepresented already. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that one.
Sharon, do you have anything you'd like to say along these lines?
Sure. age-old adage, it takes a village. My village is a global village. So I happen to live in rural Nebraska in Kearney, go Lopers. And so to build a network here in my particular area, behavioral neuroscience and also family science, to build that here isn't necessarily feasible. So I intentionally go out and find others who may be able to provide insight. And it need not be in STEM. It could just be, in higher ed, being a person of color in this country, whatever it happens to be. And I really build on that. I really utilize that information, and I find a way to then, that helps me, that sustains me to keep going and then be that representative person for others who are looking and seeing, oh, well, she can do it, therefore I can do it as well. I do agree there's lots of hidden labor. There are lots of passion. I love that phrase, passion projects, that we are encouraged, voluntold, and to take part in. And so I have to curate that stuff, else I would not be able to help anyone, including myself. So it really also takes some insight into what am I able to give without diminishing myself, diminishing my work with my family, my friends, and so on, in this cause. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We've got more and more questions coming in, which is exciting. How do I, as a woman who is not in management, help promote the hiring of women and people of color in the workplace? How do I broach these conversations? Anyone have any advice on that? That's a whole workshop right there too, as well. Anyone have any thoughts?
I would just add, one thing that I would say is, as an organization, are we aware, as a group, are we aware of our blind spots? Because we have them. And if we don't have representation, then we have many blind spots that we're not attending to. And if we're looking at profits, if we're looking at workforce development, if we're working at enrollment for us, then we're missing a huge avenue by excluding. And so I think just talking about blind spots and how we need to have, different perspectives at the table.
I would add that I think you need to understand your company or industry and their commitment to diversity and inclusion, because you need to understand if that is a mission area, then I think they would be receptive for anyone at any level to have input on the process. If that's not important to them, then I don't know how anyone can push for this. The other thing is to make sure you understand or push for an explanation of how they're ensuring a diverse pool. And so again, that's not answering your question, but it's trying to help understand the metrics and the constraints around the hiring process so that we can get a diverse pool of qualified applicants, which is the beginning part of answering the question of how do you diversify the workforce.
Yeah, I would share that. I know Sasha and I, in our long-term goals, and I think with the executive committee, think about how do we present some best practices, to folks that they can then take to their employers and maybe coach along the line. So hopefully that is something we can pull together as well as this initiative grows and in the future.
If I could add really quickly, yes. I apologize. I think practically, in response to that particular question, practically, you need access to the persons making the decisions regarding hiring and so on. I mean, I like the idea. I appreciate the idea of having a company policy or an initiative around diversity, inclusion, equity, and so on. That sounds great. But if they're not living up to that policy, then what's the point? So you need really practically direct access or indirect, access to the person or the people who are making these practical decisions regarding hiring. And then you can, and hopefully at that stage, advocate. And it may actually, as Angie referenced, access may actually be, at the, what was it he referenced, going for beers afterwards, that may be where you may access individuals rather than a formal meeting environment, so that's part of the process as well. Thank you.
All right. Unless there's anything else, I'll move on to the next one. How do you increase your ability to be exceptional, in quotes, as been said earlier, in the STEM field, continuing to grow career-wise and emotionally without coming off as aggressive? Thoughts?
Yes, I have some.
Laughing. Amanda.
Yes, because I can say there was a time in my career where I thought I needed to become aggressive to be successful, and then finally realized that wasn't authentic to myself. And I said, okay, it doesn't matter if it takes becoming an aggressive person or like somebody that I'm not to be successful, then I'm not successful because I'm not being true to myself. So I think the way I think about this question is you need to look at your own strengths and how you can really make those shine and make those be exceptional. Because if you're trying to like conform yourself to be something that your boss wants or your lab manager wants or something like that, you're never really going to feel like you're exceptional. So I think that's kind of when I felt my best, is when I'm, in roles or in positions that I can play to my strengths. And I know I've learned what my strengths are, and I know where I kind of feel that way. And I can say that the growth process is continuous. So I'm not done yet either. So I feel like I've grown a lot in my career so far, but I know even in the next year or two, I'm expecting to grow a lot more.
I'm going to say too, aggressive women are just assertive men. So that I don't know. I love, Amanda, you saying being true to yourself, because I am an assertive woman, and maybe that is seen as aggressive. And I've had some experiences in my life where I felt like I was going to have to tap it down too much. And I remember going home and telling my husband that, and he goes, if you do that, then I don't know who I married, because that's not who you are. And so I think you have to find where you're at. And I'll say one last thing, which is I have a leadership coach, and she said, oh, Angie, you value being right more than being liked. And I said, well, I am over the age of 40 and being liked is overrated. So that I'm also post tenure. So
It opens up different doors, right? Kelly, do you have anything you'd like to share?
No, I was just saying, yes, very much so. Yeah. Yeah. But it is interesting that, how, and this happens for everyone, but how much you have to change yourself or depending on your rank, depending on your title, depending on, and just thinking about again, large, complex cultural shifts that you have to look into in your organization. But when we're talking about women in STEM, if you don't have that power and positionality, then I feel like we go back to where we need those networks on how do I navigate this space? How do I not change who I am and still find success or reach my goals or, serve this organization or the people I'm trying to serve? So it just goes back then to who are you going to go to help you navigate how to handle that.
Great. Sharon, any thoughts on this question?
Sure. I think my immediate thought when I heard the question was, I think you need to decide for yourself what success means to you. For like our thresholds or benchmarks for success are individual. So for some persons, they want to be, whatever, senior vice chancellor or whatever the term is, or president of some company. And for others, they may have a different aspiration. So that's the first thing I think would be, and part of this being also authentic. So, being your authentic self and knowing here is where I'd like to go. Success for me means this. And once you're comfortable with that, I think you can navigate any environment. So thanks.
Great. We had one comment that's really just a quote to share, that the best way to grow your power is to give it away, from Carla Harris. So someone wanted me to share that. One last interesting question. At what point do women-only technology groups begin to have negative side effects? So can groups like Girls Who Code send the message that women-only groups are the only safe space for women and make it more difficult for women to transition to and thrive in a traditional mixed workplace gender dynamic? So this is a really fascinating question that I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on.
I'll just share that whenever I work with like younger girls, or I'm speaking to anybody who's working with younger girls in like this type of a setting where it's more like a homogenous group, I usually start with like, why do you think we have this? Because like, why do you think we have, you know, girls who code? Why do you think we have, you know, tech savvy girls? Why do you think we have this? And I'm waiting to hear the answer where people are like, because we're missing something. And so I think that's just the thing to communicate, is that I don't think that the Women in STEM initiative means we're missing something, or I don't think that these organizations mean we're missing something. I think it's our society's missing something. It's more of us. And we need to somehow intervene to make sure that anyone underrepresented, and I think that's one hard thing we're facing at UNO too, is it's, you know, women can be such a, just saying women alone can just be exclusive to addressing the real big issues in STEM, many of them, right? And so I don't know, I'm just thinking more about like, how do we reframe it and address it head on, the elephant in the room? Like, this isn't here because you're missing anything.
Kelly, I always, I've had folks ask me before, like, oh, are you going to have, you know, professional development events for men only? And I have commented before, again, look, if you look at just the numbers in the report, that it is a majority of men in STEM careers. And I will sometimes say, well, that place is already for you. It was created for you by other men. And so having a space where, you know, women can have these conversations where maybe they don't feel in its appropriate place otherwise is so incredibly important. And so so I am all about women's only groups, and think that the network, the learning how to have the hard discussions that we've talked about a ton today so far occur in these groups and help grow, you know, help do what we want to do, reduce barriers for women in STEM.
That's perfect.
Can I add, this is an interesting question to think about, because there's two sides. There's how do the women that are participating in these events feel? Do they feel, does it send a message to them that this is the only place to be safe? And then how do others that don't join the group, women and men, feel about it? And so we're starting a new initiative in INAR and UNL called Women Supporting Women. And it's been a difficult journey, because there are some women, and I could include myself in that group sometimes, that are really leery of all women's groups, because we've been to them, and sometimes it's a lot of griping, and sometimes it's a lot of rehashing, and sometimes women are not very nice to other women. That's certainly in the report. And so people are hesitant to join. And then others are, you know, men saying, well, why do you guys get this? Sort of what you're saying, Sasha. But I always say, you know, why do you guys get a special lunch? I'm like, well, you've had all the lunches for 200 years. Like, let us have just a few. But I get that it is, if they had an all men's network, what would we think? And so it is, I do try, I don't have an answer to it, but we've been reflecting a lot on that, because our goal is to promote all people and to promote society, and to be the best, for us, university with the best ideas and the most supported students and faculty and staff. And so I think this is one way to do it, but it's an interesting question.
It is. It is.
And I
So
think-
I want to add to what Angie said of like that, because I've countered when I get asked if I set like a women's professional network lunch or something like that within Novozymes or within my past employers. I would get that comment from male colleagues, and I would counter with, you can go set up a male lunch if you want. And then they just wouldn't. And I'm like, so it's like, so you don't feel like you need the space, whereas we feel like we need the space. So I kind of, I'm like, there's nothing stopping you from doing it. You can go do it if you want. And then they just don't, because they don't feel like they need, maybe they don't like feel like they need the space, or for whatever reason. So it's kind of like there's nothing stopping them from. But I feel like they do need that space.
But I do think the optics of a man-only lunch right now would be bad.
It would, but
So,
they
I
don't
mean,
exist. Like,
but we do have to think about that, right? That's not fair to them, that a male-only lunch, that it would be like, oh, that does not sound good. That sounds, so I get it. I mean, I'm the mom of a man.
I will add, just so everyone knows, all of our Bio Nebraska Women in STEM events and the partnership that we have with Nebraska Cures, with maybe like tiny exceptions, are all open to men. So we have our Celebrating Women in STEM luncheon coming up on the 6th. Men are invited and encouraged to join. Men were encouraged and join today. Any events that we have where we get to share this information, because it's you know, we have a lot of issues that we're trying to address across the state, that we all have ownership of and can all benefit from fixing. And so, yeah, everyone is invited all the time. So invite anyone you can to any of these events anytime, please. And thank you.
We would welcome them. I do want to quickly squeeze in the last question relating to the recommendations in the report. And I put a link in the chat to the recommendations, and just ask you all if there's a recommendation in there that you think is the most important to prioritize, or do you have any other ideas for recommendations on how we can continue to support women in STEM or increase the number of them? Kelly, I'll start with you.
I had my sticky notes out. I was like, which one am I going to sticky note as the priority, the one that I'm going to say? And I give up and I refuse to do it. I really think it's an all hands on deck. Start just ready, fire, aim towards those recommendations and figuring out ways to then just find steering points on where we're going to make sure we're seeing if things are working, seeing if we're getting some outputs that we're hoping for. But like I said, it's such a big, complex scenario that, you know, I love that we're doing this, having the conversation, recommendation 1, right? And then, but I feel like kind of making progress on all of them. People are working on all of them. It's just, how streamlined are we, and can we have a common language and a common vision so that we can cohesively move forward? So I'm just excited with all 6 of them, because I think we can move forward on all 6 of them with some vision.
Great. Amanda, I'll go to you next.
Yep. So I think, yeah, I kind of agree with Kelly. A lot of them are important, but I think the one that stuck with me was the greater flexibility. So like I mentioned earlier, like some companies have adapted more flexible work policies, but I see others that are pushing back for a return to normal and to go back to how it was. And like, I think that can be dangerous, because we know that the normal was not working for women in STEM based on the report. Like the status quo was not working. So I think it's kind of like, we need to make sure we don't backtrack as we try to go back to the way things were, because that wasn't the ideal. And then I think other things, like I know I'm going to put in my little plug for Novozymes, but like, so our corporate strategy, we've set a goal to have gender parity in management roles. So to get 50%, it's about 50% men and women in upper like C-suite level roles. And they're actually like tracking towards that and trying to setting like goals and KPIs and things around that. And I think we need more employers to do those kind of things, and then stand behind them and actually follow through. Because I think that's where also, like, if you have enough employers doing that and have that same mission, that will also start to kind of, you know, some of these issues will get addressed as more women are moving higher up in women in STEM roles and get into places of power that they can affect some of these policies and things like that too.
Great. Sharon?
Sure. I think education and visibility. I think what you're doing, you know, bringing awareness to the situation, having your different events, you know, spreading the word and encouraging others to do the same. But also with that, cultivating a sense of community and belongingness, recognizing that we don't all look the same, sound the same, have the same background, the same interests, the same passions. We're all uniquely unique individuals, and you need to have a space where that is appreciated, if not celebrated. So that's where those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Angie?
I agree. It's hard to pick one recommendation. It seems like, you know, it's such a large problem. You have to attack it. And I think the recommendations attack it in many ways. And I think that the recommendations on the report certainly speak to that. I do think that greater awareness of barriers is important, but a part of me thinks, come on, guys. I mean, when I say guys, I mean all people. Like, we know these are the barriers, and now we have this really nice report that in writing puts down what many of us have been saying for a long time. So awareness, though, isn't just reporting a report. It's someone has to listen and realize it. And I found that in my experience, I've been able to help some of my fellow male faculty members the most when they actually get to experience something alongside with me and see it firsthand, that no, it really was different for Angie than it was for me in that same moment. And I've had great success with that. That takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. And so trying to come up with ways to really help leaders and allies be aware and, have almost like a little bell that goes off like, oh, that's not right. How many times has something happened in a meeting and it's not right? And then later some male colleague comes up to me and says, that wasn't right. I go, that's true, that wasn't right, but you didn't say anything in the moment. And so greater awareness, but what does awareness mean? It can't just mean, oh, I read this. It's no, I understand it.
These are all great pieces. Thank you. Thank you all. I am going to, this was such great wisdom. Thank you all for taking the time, to share your thoughts with us today. I'm going to really quickly share my screen again to talk a little bit about the take action pieces, since we just spoke about recommendations. Here's some things that folks can do right now, and that is share the report with your networks. Sign up to volunteer with us. We already have 50+ women who are volunteering to help us plan a Women in STEM conference and plan a mentoring network. And we want to get women from STEM into schools to talk to middle school girls, things like that. And so if you're interested in being a volunteer for all of these things, go to NebraskaWomenInSTEM.com. You can find spots to sign up for these things. Share stories of women in STEM. We're looking for stories that we can feature on our website and on social media. We do have a new version of our website coming soon with a lot more content, so be on the lookout for that. Also, as I had mentioned earlier, we want to share stories of organizations who are committed to reducing barriers for women in STEM and really highlight best practices. And then finally, we do have a Women in STEM pledge that you can take on our website. And we have a number of companies, lots of individuals who've already signed on to that pledge. Please follow us on our website, follow us on all of our social media channels so that you can stay up to date on what we have going on. We do have that Celebrating Women in STEM Luncheon coming up in October, on October 6th. So we'd love to have you there. Sasha, do you have anything you'd like to share here as we wrap up?
Just to add, the luncheon on October 6th is featuring Silva Raker. She's the inaugural CEO of the Kiewit Luminarium. She is from out of state, and let's show her a Nebraska welcome like no other. The event is free for Bio Nebraska members. If you are university affiliated, you're a member. So that might be a lot of you. If you would like to come to the luncheon and are not a Bio Nebraska member, please email me and I will give you free complimentary access to the event for attending this event today. So you can reach out to me either on the contact form at bionebraska.org or my email sforson@bionebraska.org. And stay tuned. There will be more to come. Phase 2 of our website will be launching soon as well. And like Amanda said, please pass anything our way that we can share, upcoming events that are related to this, stories, whatever. We want to know it. We want to share it.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.